BizSchool is brought to you by Neon Canvas. Neon Canvas is a digital marketing boutique. You can find more about Neon Canvas at neoncanvas.com. Welcome. Here it goes. This is the 5th episode of BizSchool with Alex Rasmussen. I'm going to be teaching you all things business. First, I want to thank you all for your support I've received about the podcast and the wonderful feedback we've gotten. It's been awesome. I appreciate you guys listening and giving me that feedback. It definitely spurs us to get more of this going. My goal was and is to bring you conversations that are going to help you in your daily life. We have not reported a podcast in a couple of months because my summer's been absolutely nuts. So on the show tonight, here's a few things we're going to discuss. We're going to find out what I've been up to this summer, why I haven't recorded in a while, my view on the current economic situation and political climate, an interview with my chief business consultant, Robin Rasmussen, my mom, sitting across the table here, and why legal needs to be a core component of your business strategy. So let's get into what I've been up to since you guys saw me last. I think the last episode re-release was in mid-June, so it's been a couple of months. So my wife Sarah and I decided back in March that we were going to sell our house. It was early March. It was kind of a crazy time, right before spring break. And of course, as we came back from spring break, COVID hit. And so you can imagine how crazy all that's gone, trying to buy a new house, sell a house in the middle of COVID and the summertime. The good news is we got our house sold. We've moved into a new house and we're getting settled in there. So that's good. Things are getting a little bit back to normal and it's easier for me to get in and get these podcasts recorded, keep them coming on a more regular basis. We spent a lot of the summer bouncing around. It's been a really weird time to not have a home during COVID. We've been living in several different parts of the country, whether it be Hot Springs where we've got a little condo at the lake. We've been down in Florida a couple of times, where we've been over here in Memphis, either living in a hotel or living in a unfinished home. So that's what we've been up to. It's been really interesting to see, for me, bouncing around the country and in this time where we're depending a lot on restaurants and things like that to get our services, to understand what COVID has done to a lot of businesses and how they're operating differently in different parts of the country. The number one difference that I've noticed post-COVID is mindset. You've got it's kind of three different mindsets and buckets that I'm putting people into. You've got some that are afraid, things like schools, governments, major corporations. You see Apple has shut down their stores. They haven't reopened them. You've got schools that are shutting down. You've got governments that aren't reopening, kind of in this survival mode. So then you've got that mode, the survival mode. And that's where I'm kind of seeing a lot of your restaurants, mom and pop, kind of small retail, where they've got all these rules and restrictions on them and they're trying to figure out how to survive. So you've got your super cautious, like your corporations like Apple, who aren't even opening your stores, your mom and pop restaurants that are in survival mode. They're just trying to keep their businesses open and operating. And then you're finding other businesses that are actually finding a way to thrive through these times. Neon Canvas has grown through these times. Home service companies are booming at this time. I mean, try to find somebody to come and paint your house right now, or do some plumbing work, or do some electrical work. You're going to find that all these companies are loaded up. So they're finding a way to thrive. And I think that's really interesting. And to me, the main difference in these three sects of companies are their mindset, what they're thinking about, what they're afraid of. So I can give you an example of our kids' school. So we were concerned about schooling, what we were going to do with our kids. And ultimately, we decided we wanted them to go back in person. But there was a little bit of confusion for us with our school district in Germantown, Tennessee, that you also, if you wanted the option to be able to go virtual, sign up for virtual. So we thought to ourselves, well, we'll sign them up for both the in-person and virtual, so that if they don't start in person, we'll have them covered with virtual. Well, then the time came for them to get their school assignments, and we found out that they had put all of our kids in virtual rather than in person. And then making that change and getting them to redo that has been a disaster. So there's very much like a lot of fear-based decisions happening around governments and schools and things like that. The other thing, like the Apple Store being closed, we've had an extremely tough time as we grow and need to bring in new equipment and new products into our company. Getting those products, technology products, all kinds of different things that we're unable to get in a timely manner. Furniture, you name it, pretty much because of the backlog and what's going on with COVID-19. Restaurants mentality, this is different in different parts of the country. So there's some restaurants who, bars, for example, that can't open at all. Others have to close at 9 or 10. And then you've got other restaurants that are trying to operate at half capacity. But what's interesting to me is you've got a lot of restaurants who are thriving in this. So we went to a restaurant recently for a business outing called Coastal Fish Company here in town. This is a fine dining restaurant in Memphis, and they were completely sold out. I think it was on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. So you're seeing restaurants find a way to survive. But in other parts of the country, that's here in Memphis, Tennessee, like some friends of mine who own restaurants up in Nashville, they're having a lot harder time getting people to come back into restaurants. So that mentality throughout different parts of the country is slowing down the growth and sort of the rebirth of some of these businesses. Even though if you look at the stock market, the economy, we've seen very much a V-shaped recovery. So what's that mean for all you guys? I think what that means is that mindset is what's going far. Is what's going to take you the farthest in your recovery. You can't be paralyzed by your decisions or fear. You have to be going after what's going to make your business survive and thrive in these times. So if you're a restaurant, and that means you've got to be doing more to-go orders, or you've got to be doing more catering. You've got to figure out a way to survive in these times. Same thing. If you're a retail store and you're not allowing people in your store, or traffic's slowed, you've got to find a way to get your products online. So all of these things, I think, play into mentality, mindset, and things that you can control on your own without influence from the government on the outside. Let's talk a little bit about Neon Canvas and what's happened for us. So when COVID hit, we ended up deferring over 6 figures in billing for our clients, of clients who said, hey, we need some help on our billing. So over $100,000 of billing. But at the same time, in 2020 so far, we've sold over $1.7 million in new business, which has already surpassed what we did in 2019. We did close to $1.2 million in new business. So that's adding on top of the already existing business that we've had. Just in the first 8 months of the year, we've already surpassed what we did last year. And a lot of that is mindset and mentality, adapt and grow. Do not be fearful of what's coming to you in the future. You have to be able to find ways to grow your business, even in tough economic times. So you can only focus on what you can control, period, end of discussion. If you can't control whether or not the government's going to allow you to open, you can't worry about that. What you have to do is figure out how your business is going to be able to thrive and make money. And a lot of times that's turning to a digital medium. One of the things we did was we put on a program for orthodontists in our niche to help them through COVID, to explain to them how they could get through this period while keeping their business surviving and thriving. And that was huge for us. We had over 2,000 people sign up. Obviously, those are paid subscriptions. And then we brought in other vendor companies to partner with us. And obviously, that vendor support helped us create some revenue. So I'll look back on our books, and April of this year was actually our largest revenue month ever as a company. Why is that? Because we didn't get paralyzed by the situation. We decided to attack it. So reach out to me, of course, if you've got any questions. I want to talk to you guys about that. Comments, you need anything, no matter what type of business you're in. I'd be happy to bounce some ideas off each other to get to tell you, here's what I'm seeing in other parts of the country that we've been to. We've been to Colorado, we've been to Florida, we've been to Arkansas, all during of COVID. We've been a couple other places too. So I can tell you North Carolina, can tell you what I'm seeing in these places. So let's get to the guest portion of this. I'm uber excited about how episode 5 is going to turn out. The guest portion of this show, because I've got someone who's very special to me. In fact, without her, I would not be here. She's my biggest fan, supporter. She's also my go-to for business advice. She has literally seen it all. In previous episodes of BizSchool, we discussed partnerships, relationships, funding, and now we're going to get into legal. I'm going to go step by step for you through how to start and run a successful business. That's the idea of BizSchool. And this is going to be a very, very important podcast for you guys, because a lot of people wait until they're in trouble or wait until they've got a major legal issue before they figure out who their attorney is going to be. I think that's a major mistake, and I'll tell you why as we unfold this podcast. But we're starting with the pillars of business, and each one of these in the first episodes is going to dive deep into one of those pillars. So let's get into legal. There's a Chinese proverb that I really like and can relate back to how I think legal advice and the structure should be in your business. And the proverb says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Now, how that pertains to your business is this. Before you get into a contract dispute with a vendor, an employee or an employer, a customer, what have you, you should have already planned for that scenario. You should have planted that tree 20 years ago. What if X happens? What if Y happens? Then what are you going to do? You should have already planted that tree. However, if and when the shit hits the fan, you better start planting that tree right then. Don't wait until it's too late to fix an issue before you can act on it. I get calls from friends and colleagues all the time asking for legal advice. They think somehow because my mom's a lawyer that she can telepathically put information into my head that I can't give legal advice. But what I can do is I can give you insight from things that I've been through, and then I can give you my mom's number so you can call her and she can give you legal advice. That's great. I love helping other people. The problem is with me not being a lawyer, I'm not qualified to give you that legal advice. So if you've got a legal issue, don't call me, call an attorney. Better yet, if you're a business owner, you better already have a lawyer. You can call anytime for any reason, and if they can't help you, they're going to give you someone that can. So for instance, when I decided I was going to start Neon Canvas, I went to my previous employer to negotiate my exit. But I went into that meeting already armed with advice that I was given by my attorneys beforehand. So I knew based on how those conversations went, what my next steps were going to be. So when I got served with a lawsuit from my previous employer trying to enforce a non-compete, I wasn't surprised at all. I wasn't paralyzed by the situation. I had attorneys to handle the legal battle. I had a company to run. I knew that a judge was not going to stop me from providing for my family. I also knew no man was going to hold me down or hold me back. I answered to God and myself, period. It's that simple. You too can have that confidence when you have a legal team in your corner that knows your ambitions, knows your goals, and is going to work to help you achieve them as seamlessly as possible. You've got to have that team, and that team better include a good attorney. My team has the best lawyer, Robin Rasmussen, aka Mom. Mom began her legal career over 30 years ago as a word processor to a paralegal here at a law firm in Memphis. While she was attending college, she worked her way up to a paralegal and eventually became an attorney, all while raising two wild-ass boys and working full-time. Pretty impressive if you ask me. I had a front row seat to watch her ascent. She honed her litigation skills as a boutique employment law firm before joining Apperson Crump, one of the original law firms here in Memphis, Tennessee, as just the second female member of the firm. Pretty impressive. She eventually left Apperson Crump to co-found Dinkelspiel, Rasmussen, and Mink, where she is now. And she represents businesses in all types of matters, including complex commercial litigation. She's been named one of the top lawyers in Memphis by the Memphis Business Journal for 10 straight years, and also has been named a super lawyer by Thompson Reuters. So, Mom, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Alex.
Did I miss anything of your accolades? Did I sum it up there pretty well?
It's just fine.
All right. So to tell you, guys, again, this is anybody that is in a situation where maybe you have a child young or you jump into a career that maybe it's not going to be the career forever, I think Robin's story is one that you can look at and say, okay, you can get there. Maybe you're a clinical assistant working in an ortho office and you want to be an orthodontist. You can still do that. You can still have a family, work full time, go to school, and eventually become what you want to become. Both Mom and I are proof positive of that. I didn't graduate from college until 2011, 10 years after I graduated from high school. So it took me quite a while. I think, Mom, you were in a very similar situation. Took you, 15 years probably after you graduated?
I
before you became an attorney?
graduated from law school exactly 20 years from the day I graduated from high school.
20 years.
20 years.
20 years on that on that education journey to go from graduating from high school to her ultimate career, which is an attorney.
Which was a lawyer.
20 years. That's pretty impressive. So tell me about your background and how you got into the legal world.
Okay, so when you were just a little fella, I was working at a chemical company, of all things. I didn't like it, and I went and answered a job for a typist at what was then known as Wildman, Herald, Allen, Dixon, and McDonald. They stuck me in a closed-up room with another young woman and threw work at us to type. That's essentially how it started. You were about a year and a half at the time. I then left there, went to Apperson Crump, where I worked for a guy named Phil Kaminsky, who was probably the best boss I've ever had. I mean, he was taught me a tremendous amount about the law, and quite frankly made it possible for me to go to law school. He paid off a student loan for me so I could get a loan to go to law school, which is what I did. And I went to law school, was working for one of the premier divorce lawyers in town at the time, which basically taught me that I didn't want to do family law. That is a rough and tough area of the law. It's very emotionally draining. But anyway, so I got out of law school, went to work for the boutique law firm at the time, worked there for a bunch of years, and the partner I was working with decided that he didn't want to do law anymore, and so he left to be a mediator. And I left shortly thereafter and went to Apperson Crump, which is where I had been originally working for Mr. Kaminsky. And so I was at Apperson for a while, doing basically the same thing, employment law, workers' comp, that kind of thing, and just decided that I wanted to strike out on my own. We have a family history of entrepreneurs in our family. Apparently none of us do well working for others. So
you're saying we don't take direction well.
We don't take orders well.
Not even from each other.
That's right, not even from each other. And then I went up. So Dinkelspiel, Rasmussen, and Mink started. We started it 10 or 11 years ago with just Dinkelspiel, Rasmussen, and Mink, and we're now up to 9 attorneys and 8 or 9 staff, and going strong. So that's the short story of the legal world, which you and your brother and the rest of the family have kind of drug along or been pushed. So at various different times in our careers.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing.
Well, thanks for that little background. I want to get into some nitty gritty so that we can help business owners and folks who are listening to this podcast kind of understand some of the pitfalls. What are the most common examples of lawsuits that you see with small businesses? Okay,
small businesses get in trouble the most with what we call contracts, either written or oral contracts. And I will say to you, if you don't have good paper, your lawsuit will cost you exponentially more money. And I tell people all the time, pay me now or pay me later. Don't come to me now when you're first getting started. Just wait until you get sued your first time or somebody doesn't pay you. Then come to me, because I make a lot more money from a lawyer standpoint when I try lawsuits. So the legal world, the court system, is not people friendly, but they resolve disputes so that we don't we don't shoot each other, right? It's a, quote, civil way to resolve a dispute. So most of the small businesses have problems with contracts, whether they're governmental contracts, whether they're contracts between individual businesses, where they don't have contracts at all. And I will tell you this, if you don't remember anything else from this podcast, good paper makes for good friends. That's right. And don't try to represent yourself.
That's right. So let's talk about that. So if almost all of the lawsuits, or the majority of the lawsuits that you guys see with small businesses are related around a contract, and you're saying good paper makes for good friends, what does that really mean? So I've got a contract I'm about to get into with a company. What should I do with that contract before I sign it?
You should send it to me and let me look at it first. Now, most of the times, lawyers are going to say, well, you need to rewrite this paragraph or you need to rewrite that paragraph. But what a lawyer needs to do is sit down with their client and say, okay, if you leave this in here the way it's written, here are the risks you run, right? If you say one of the most common easy things to explain is what we call an evergreen contract. And that's a contract that renews automatically for its term unless you do something. Okay. So the risk of an evergreen contract is that you wind up getting stuck in a relationship that you want to get out of, and you forget to give notice within the terms of the contract that it's going to terminate. And then you're stuck for another year. Okay. So that's a real simple thing that happens in contracts. They tend to be pretty complex. I can't tell you the number of people say, I want a one-page contract. Well, okay.
Right.
The problem is a lot of times a one-page contract doesn't cover everything that my client needs to be protected. And there's things that lay people don't know that all come into effect with how a contract is interpreted.
Right.
So good paper makes for good friends. So go ahead and pay your lawyer on the front end rather than pay them on the back end, or at least know what your risks are, right? If you know what your risks are, then you can make a business decision to accept that risk or not accept that risk, but you have to know. And the only way you know is if you talk to your lawyer.
And I think one of the things where, now we're so used to legalese being, baked in behind some link that we don't even read, right? So you're signing up with a new company, a vendor, or what have you. They send you over a login to set up your account, and part of that account setup is you agree into their legalese. Right. What does a small business owner do in a position like that, where it feels like you either accept this or you don't take the product or service? Okay,
so that's where you have to think about what your risk is, and whether or not the person who sent you the terms that accept the terms and agreements or whatever, whether or not there's any movement in there. And that happens a lot of times when you have a really big company and a smaller company, right? The big guy wants to jump on you and tell you what you're going to do. I would encourage you to read the terms and conditions of those agreements. Don't just click on it. So says the person who clicks on them all the time, right?
Right.
But from a business standpoint, for instance, one of the things that happens to people all the time is in those terms and agreements or conditions, there's what we call a jurisdiction provision. Well, you're going to click on that agreement in Memphis, Tennessee, but if you have a dispute, you might be required to litigate that dispute in California or New York or fill in the blank, right? Again, you just exponentially increased your litigation cost if you get into litigation. Right. So the other thing is what we call a choice of laws. A lot of contracts say, at least the ones I write for you, say jurisdiction is Tennessee, and this is done under Tennessee law, right? I know what Tennessee law is. I know what Mississippi law is. I'm licensed in both of those states, and some of the other laws in town, not in town, around the country. But for instance, I don't know what the law is in Idaho, right? So their contract law might be slightly different than Tennessee or Mississippi law. And a non-compete is an example of that, right? In California, non-competes are void as a matter of public policy. In Tennessee, they're acceptable, but they've got lots of conditions on them. So those are the things that lawyers know that lay people don't.
Well, I do want to get into non-competes, but I got a couple of questions for you before we dive into non-competes.
Okay.
As it pertains to legal, give me some of the biggest mistakes owners make. And before you answer that question, are those contracts, the legalese, are they negotiable? At what level do you find that contracts are negotiable?
Generally, everything in a contract is negotiable. Again, the times that you find that they're not is when you've got some big, humongous corporation that says, I've got something you want, take it or leave it, because we don't need your business. Right? Those are the things that are usually not negotiable. Okay. But there are ways to get around that, too.
So again, as you answer this question of what are some of the biggest mistakes business owners make, I want you all to realize that just because you're handed a contract with certain terms in it does not mean you have to sign that contract. I mean, there may be things in there that you're not comfortable with, and you need to go back and negotiate those points.
That's right.
You don't need to just, bend over and take it. So as it pertains to legal, what is the biggest mistake business owners make?
Trying to represent themselves. You talked about Chinese proverbs earlier. Here's our favorite one in the legal profession. He who represents himself has a fool for a client. The best way to explain this is I don't tell Alex how to run a marketing company. Alex doesn't tell me how to practice law. Your Google search is no substitute for my law degree. When you try to do it yourself, you're going to make a mistake. How costly that mistake is to you is yet to be seen. So when you call your lawyer up and you say, I want a one-page contract, I want a one-page deal, or I don't need a contract, it's a handshake deal. What people don't understand is your understanding of a handshake deal may or may not be the same as the other person's idea of a handshake deal. And that's where you get into trouble. That's the biggest mistake that people make. The second biggest mistake that people make is when they get into a dispute, they try to resolve it without talking to their lawyer. And that winds up costing them more money in the long run. The laws in this country are so massive that nobody can know them all. And lay people don't even know where to go find them. So those are probably the two biggest mistakes that people make. That and not calling us until it's too late to help fix it.
And I think one of the reasons people do that, and I want to speak to this quickly, listen, having an attorney is not overly expensive. It's not something that is going to break you every month. In fact, we get a bill from your law firm every month. And sometimes it's a big bill, sometimes it's a small bill. Oftentimes if let's say it's a multiple $1,000 bill, let's say it's a $7,000 bill for services that we've been given. I don't necessarily have to pay them $7,000 in that month. I may break it up over a couple of months. I mean, they're a business just like you're a business, and they're going to work with you. So when you've got a legal issue, don't be afraid to call your attorney and start racking up hours, because it's going to save you money in the long run. And then you get that bill, you work out the payment, you pay it with them. But your budget, your yearly budget in your practice should have money for legal. If you don't have to use it, great. But if you use it, if you need it, it's there.
Just like our firm. We have in our projections every year an amount of money for what we call professional services.
Right.
We're not accountants, so we don't do accounting work. Right? We're not tech people, so we don't do tech work. Right? So just like we don't try to do our own accounting and our own tech work, tech and accountants shouldn't try to do their own legal work. I mean, would you give yourself heart surgery? Of course not.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Or straighten your own teeth.
Or straighten your own teeth. That's right. Would you ever try to straighten your own teeth? Of course not.
So let's chat about lawsuits.
Okay.
So the shit has hit the fan. You've gotten into a contract dispute and you're trying to work it out. When do you sue?
When all other avenues have been exhausted. Suing somebody is like pulling out a shotgun and blowing your whole relationship into kingdom come. Because once a lawsuit is filed, rarely is there any stepping back from it. Lawsuits are incredibly expensive, and there's a lot of different reasons for that, the least of which have to do with the lawyers, most of which have to do with the courts, but that's a soapbox we won't get into today. But filing a lawsuit or being sued, quite frankly, is the worst thing you can do to resolve a situation. Now, having said that, please everybody go sue everybody, because that's how I make my living, right?
Right.
But really and truly, you should only sue as a last resort. And sometimes you have to. If your person on the other side is not returning your calls, they're not responding to you, they cease communication, sometimes you have to file a lawsuit to get their attention. But I'll encourage all of my clients to try and resolve the issues. And sometimes it takes lawyers, but pay your lawyer to help you resolve your case rather than try your case. Once a lawsuit is filed, for all practical purposes, everything else is out of your control, right? How the lawsuit gets handled, you have some input into it, but it's really your lawyer's decision. Also, you don't know what the other side's going to do. If you file a lawsuit and they go either one, try to represent themselves, that's exponentially increases your costs. Two, they get a lawyer that either doesn't know the area of the law or perhaps is not quite as good at what they're arguing about than you are. For instance, don't go hire a personal injury lawyer to litigate a contract case, right? All of those things are out of your control, and that's what costs a lot of money. And you don't want to have to pay to litigate a lawsuit if you can help it, even if you win, right? Because even if you win, what do you win? Maybe you win the balance of the lawsuit or the balance of the contract amount due, but if your contract doesn't have attorney's fee provisions, you may have spent more in attorney's fees than you did collected in what was owed.
Right.
And what a lot of people also don't understand is that just because you win a big judgment doesn't mean you collect a big judgment.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the other person didn't pay you in the first time for a reason.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, so now you're just stuck in a collections.
That's right. You're stuck in collections where you're lucky if you get 50 cents on the dollar.
Right.
Right. Plus, you win a lawsuit. Let's say you win a $500,000 judgment. What happens if they take it to bankruptcy? Well, now you've just spent all of this money getting a $500,000 that goes away in a bankruptcy court.
Goes away.
Right?
Almost
and there's
amazing.
nothing you can do about that. So, notwithstanding that I love what I do, and being in the courtroom is a ton of fun, it's the worst thing in the world to do for a client.
Yeah, you say all the time that a bad settlement's better than a good judgment.
Absolutely.
Any day of the week, right?
That's right.
And why is that?
For the reasons that we've talked about. And one of the things we haven't talked about is the human cost, right? If I've got Alex in a deposition all day long, well, that's 8 hours that he isn't out there making money for his company.
Right.
And if I start pulling in your employees for depositions, or they have to be down at a trial, that can shut down your whole operation.
Right.
Right? So not only do you have the actual paying the lawyer cost, you've got the cost to your business from lost time, lost revenue there. And sometimes it just isn't worth it. Sometimes it's better to just walk away. Now, sometimes you can solve a problem with what we call, let's see, what's the legal term? Oh, yeah, ES&D letter. Sometimes that solves the problem.
Eat shit and die, for anybody that didn't know
Well,
what that
I
means.
didn't say that.
I said it, yeah, in the podcast.
But it's a strongly worded letter, right?
Right.
Pay this bill or we're going to sue you.
Right.
Or pay this bill, what I like to say is I will have to advise my client on all their legal options. I hate to include a threat of a lawsuit if I'm not going to go through with it.
Yeah. Well, and this is something that, quite frankly, I don't waste a lot of time on. We do this quite often in our business where, I'm always going to give you 1, 2, 3 opportunities to work it out together. And if you're
Right.
just showing me an unwillingness to do that, my very next step is going to be is a call to you.
Right.
And we're going to talk about it. We're going to assess whether or not this is worth legal action on?
Right.
Is it worth the ESOD letter, or do we need to file a lawsuit? And
Right.
that's almost always we're trying to avoid filing a lawsuit.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm making my position to the other side very clear. This is being turned over to my attorneys. You don't want to deal with me, you're going to deal with them. But you cannot have a fear in your business of doing that. You've got to have an attorney who's ready to fight for you and battle for you on the other side. You can't just keep kicking the can down the road and hope that you're going to get paid one day.
And once you do that, from a business person, you just need to step out of it.
Right.
Don't worry about it. Once you've turned it over to your lawyer, move on to something else. If you have a question, call. Now, your lawyer ought to be communicating with you, right? You should get copies of emails, copies of correspondence, major decisions are not to be made without consultation with you. But once you've turned it over to your lawyer, then just stop. Don't talk to the person anymore. Don't try to work it out. It's got to be, because here's what happens. You turn it over to your lawyer, you give some settlement authority, let's say. And the lawyer starts negotiating with the other side. Well, then the other side calls Alex directly and says, hey, Alex, now can we work this out? Well, you've cut what you need to say is, no, call my lawyer.
Yeah, because you're undermining
the
your
process.
ability to get it done.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
Because in any negotiation, I mean, the ultimate the goal for any negotiation is for both sides to feel like they gave up a little bit.
That's right.
Both sides need to lose. Both sides need to win, but both sides need to lose.
That's right.
In order for a negotiation to go the way that it needs to go. And in order to do that, quite frankly, you have to start, at some unreasonable point, very oftentimes, to get where you want to be. So let's shift into non-competes. You mentioned that earlier. I want to go back to non-competes. It's something that varies throughout the country. So we just want to talk about it in a very general, kind of general topic. If you're a small business, should you be asking your employees to enter into non-compete? And at what level do you need to be trying to restrict their business behavior?
Okay, so non-competes are designed to protect a true business interest. That's what they're supposed to do, right? You don't want you don't want to spend 5 or 10 years training your employees and then they say, see ya, and walk off with half your clients, right? Or even worse than that, you spend a bunch of time teaching somebody or training somebody how to do something. Your plan, if you will, your business plan, your model that you use to sell your business, and that person takes your model and leaves. Okay? Non-competes are designed to stop that. All right? What's enforceable? Reasonable time and space, right? You can prevent someone from working for a reasonable time and a reasonable space.
3 to 6 months in the city of Memphis.
That's a very generous non-compete. But if you think about it, if you can't hold on to your clients for 6 months,
how good is your business?
How good is your business anyway? Right? If your clients or your customers are not loyal enough to you that they're going to jump when somebody offers them $50 a month less than you do, then do you really want them anyway?
Right.
Okay? If you're good enough at what you do, you don't really need a non-compete. Right? Because your customers are what you're trying to protect. Now, you can have things like non-solicitation agreements, right? Which say, former employee, you cannot solicit these clients for this period of time, right? Or you can't solicit other employees to come with you. You can have confidentiality agreements.
I like that. Yeah, okay. Where we can keep our company secrets secret.
That's right. That's right. Now, in Tennessee, there's a law, the Business Trade Secrets Law, which doesn't allow an employee or anybody else you work with to take your stuff and use it someplace else. Okay? So sometimes these agreements, the non-competes, the confidentiality agreements, are a way of conveying to your employees, this is the law, this is what we expect you to do, and if you want to work here, you're going to have to sign this.
Right.
And here's the real hammer on these types of agreements. If you violate this agreement, We are going to seek enforcement in a court of law, and you get to pay for it.
Right.
Okay? That's the biggest hammer in those agreements, are what we call attorney's fee provisions, right? If I have to sue you, you get to pay for it.
Right.
Okay? So it tends to make people go, right?
Yeah.
When they think they're going to leave. Now, one thing business owners do need to do, free piece of advice, when you hire someone, make sure you ask them if they're subject to a non-compete or a confidentiality agreement, and ask to see it before you hire them.
Right.
Because here's what, as you as a business owner don't want to have happen. You don't want to hire some great person and then you get one of those ES&D letters from that person's former employer that says you hired this person and they can't work for you. Okay?
Right.
And if you continue to employ them, then we're going to sue you too. Now,
And they're going to seek damages and that sort of thing.
That's exactly right.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Good.
So,
Well, I think that answered my question about non-compete. So anything else? What is any other, this is your chance to reach out to the small business community and say, hey, here's what you guys need to be thinking about. Is there anything else I hadn't asked you or topics you want to cover?
there are a couple of things that small businesses need to think about that they don't understand, and that is, what type of entity do you need? Do you need a full-fledged corporation with shares of stock, boards of directors, that sort of things? Do you need an LLC? Will a partnership suffice? Should it be a limited partnership or a general partnership? Do you want an S-type corporation? Do you want a family limited partnership? There are so many different business entities. Take a minute, sit down with your lawyer and or your accountant and figure out what is the best thing for you to do financially that will cost you the least amount of taxes, the least amount of fees, and go forward from there. Everybody thinks, oh, I can go online and fill out an LLC, and I've got an LLC in the state of Tennessee. Well, you do that, and you've got a $300 a year LLC fee. You've got to pay FF&E taxes. You've got to pay income taxes, all in the state of Tennessee, because you didn't understand that when you did that, you signed yourself up for all those taxes.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And maybe it doesn't matter to you. But sit down and talk to your lawyer, talk to your accountant, figure out what's the best thing for you to do. Spend the time when you start your business to set it up right to begin with. Because if you set it up right to begin with the help of your lawyer, including your personnel files, how are you going to handle your personnel? Are you going to have 8 employees? Are you going to have 15? Are you going to have 2? Laws that apply to your business change depending on the number of employees you have. You're fixing to hit that 20 employee mark. I say you generally, not Neon Canvas, but now I'm subject to COBRA.
Right.
Or you're going to hit a 75 mark. Okay, now I'm subject to the Family Medical Leave Act. Now I'm going to hit 100 employees. Well, now I'm subject to the Parental Leave Act. Okay, so those are the kinds of things that your lawyer can help you with.
That, and I'll tell you another thing that we didn't talk about today that your lawyer can help you with, which is protecting a brand that you've already built, whether that's through trademarking and things like that. And that doesn't, even Real Robin's firm can help with that no matter where you are in the country. So
that's right.
There's some things you can do really for anybody, no matter where they are in the country, that help them solidify their business interests.
That's right. We haven't talked about trademarks, but trademarks are super important. Super, super important, just to keep somebody from taking Neon Canvas, to keep them from taking your logo.
Which people have tried to do.
Which people have tried to do.
We've had to lawyer up.
And the good thing about Neon Canvas is Neon Canvas did all this stuff at the very beginning. They trademarked their name, they trademarked the logo. We did all that stuff so that when someone tried to hijack the logo, for instance, it took one letter and boom, it was gone.
Right. That's
okay?
Right.
Because you paid for it on the front end, which gave you the protection on the back end.
That's right. And it cost me a little bit of money for those each it and die letters, but at the end of the day, it was no harm, no foul.
But it didn't cost you the loss of your trademark.
That's right. That's exactly right. Or a lawsuit.
That's
So
right.
this has all been great. Mom, tell people how they can find you if they've got questions for you or want to follow up with you after this.
Okay, so you can call me at the firm, 901-759-2470. you can go to our website, which is drmlawmemphis.com, drmlawmemphis.com. And other than that, they can call you, Alex, and you can send them over to me.
Ask me for free legal advice. I'll give you shit advice and then send you on the way. So I always like to end the show with something that's a little bit of fun. So here's what I'm going to do. I call this 3 things. I'm going to give you 3 things, and you've got to choose the one you want. This is very important. The one you want, one you discard, so it goes into the trash. You can't do anything with it, and then one you're going to give away. Okay, so very easy to do. It's 3 things. It's not hard. So here's your 3 things. $1 million, that's cash, a permanent vacation, and eternal youth. So you got to keep one, discard one, and give one away. What are you doing?
Well, first of all, I'm going to ask you to define a permanent vacation and eternal youth. You already defined $1 million. You said $1 million cash. Right. So define permanent vacation and define eternal youth, and then I'll tell you. A
permanent vacation is one that is a vacation where you leave, you don't have any responsibilities, and you can go on it as long as you want. It's an indefinite amount of time of true vacation. Okay. No work, no stress, no worries. Eternal youth means you can stay young forever. You're constantly trying to get my kids to stay 4 or 5 years old or 6 years old. So I thought that might be one that you might be interested in giving away. But this is your game. I'm just here to track the answers.
Okay, so I'm going to define eternal youth as being the age I am now with the body I had 30 years ago, but the knowledge I have now. So the $1 million, what do I have to do? Keep one, throw one away? And
yeah, you keep one, discard one, and give one away.
Okay, so I'm going to give the $1 million away. All
right, you're giving it away. You can give it to me, by the way. I'll take it.
Or your brother. Fuck. How about I split it between the 2 of you?
What else is new?
Okay. The permanent vacation, I'm giving that away. That's boring.
Well, you gave away the $1 million.
Oh.
So you're discarding
So I'm discarding it.
You're discarding the permanent vacation.
That's right, because that's boring and, no.
And you're keeping eternal youth for yourself.
Eternal youth for myself.
All right. Fair enough. Good job. Well, I want to thank you, Robin Rasmussen, Mom, for coming in and talking about legal pitfalls today. I think this was a great show. We're going to have a ton of really good nuggets come out of it. And if you've got any questions for Robin, she told you where you could reach her at drmlawmemphis.com. That's it for us. Good night, everybody. On the next episode, I want to be talking to you guys about the art of the hustle. This is going to be a good one. You're not going to miss it, with one of my good friends, Jerry, that owns King Limos here in town. This guy is one of the best I've ever seen at owning the hustle. You don't want to miss it. So subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, and be sure to check it out when it drops. Please take a few seconds to leave us a review. It'd mean a lot. Hit that 5 stars. And then, just come back here. Keep coming. We're going to keep giving you good shows, keep giving you good nuggets. Share with your friends. We'd really appreciate it. That's all for today's show, and the rest is history.